Ohio State is moving on to the Rose Bowl, and whoa, Nelly. That was quite a performance to clinch it. 42-17, the Buckeyes absolutely throttle Tennessee in a first-round college football playoff game at the Horseshoe on Saturday night. As you can tell, I've been talking a lot about this game. My voice is not at 100%. I don't know. Zach Boren, it's a Monday. It's a Boren Blitz. How's your voice?
My voice isn't much better. I'm still hoarse from how much I was yelling Saturday night. I mean, if you are a Buckeye fan, and we were talking about this leading up to the football game, there were so many people selling their tickets, not going to this game. You know, I don't know if it was cold, the holidays, and Tennessee traveled, and they did. They showed out in the Horseshoe. But if you were a true Buckeye fan and you were not at that game Saturday night, shame on you, because it was one of the most fun games I have ever been to as an Ohio State fan.
There might be a lot more people claiming they were there wearing scarlet than actually were. Kudos to Tennessee for their fan base to showing up, and shout out to them for stimulating the Columbus economy for a couple days and then leaving by the end of the third quarter because they didn't have anything left to see Ohio State complete domination on offense. Complete domination on defense. An offensive game plan that I frankly would have liked to have seen 3 weeks ago, but it showed up for the college football playoff, allowed some folks to maybe move on from that. Maybe not everyone, won't speak for everyone, but both sides of the football, incredibly impressive. Will Howard off the chart. I'm like jumping already into your three guys because that list is probably going to be more than three. What do you think was the most impressive part of the win, Zach?
I don't know if you can say what the most impressive part was, because there are so many parts about that game that just jump out at you. Like the way the offensive line played, right? Everyone, that was the big question mark, and everyone has been going off on the offensive line, on social media, the fan base, the media, like everyone in general, and they played maybe the best they could have played in that type of game going against that kind of D-line. Talk about Will Howard. Look at how much flack he got after the Michigan game and what he went out and did Saturday night. Talk about the defense, right? But Jack and JT collectively, I think that was the best game that they have ever played in their Ohio State careers together, right? Like Jack has played some great games on as himself. JT has played some great games. Obviously, the Penn State games come to mind. Collectively, though, together, by far, it's the best game they've ever played together on the field. And so you talk about all of these storylines, all of these things that this Ohio State team did well, and you could just go down the list of what was clicking on all cylinders. I mean, you know, I guess you could say maybe special teams wasn't, right, with the fumble, you know, that kick before half. But, yeah. I mean, all in all, this was a complete Ohio State victory.
Yeah, I left out special teams on purpose. That was just a little bit too far, and I don't think a Boren Blitz on this Monday needs to focus really on any of those negatives, because this, you mentioned Jack and JT, that was the version of those two 5-stars that was supposed to wreck opponents together for 3 years and then be gone. They weren't even supposed to be here for a college football playoff opportunity at the end of their senior years, year 4 with the Buckeyes. This was also the version of the national title contender and the most talented team in the country that we were expecting to see all year long. And there's a part of you that can say, and you mentioned this, I think, after the Oregon loss in October, hey, you don't necessarily want to peak and play your best football in the middle of the year. Maybe it will, again, I don't want to keep bringing it up because it feels like, you know, dwelling on the past too much at this point, but like maybe you could have peaked starting on November 30th and carried that into the postseason, but they can't change that now. And I do think that the way that they responded to that loss, the emotional, physical, you know, everything setback that happened, the way that they channeled that into this, it was the biggest question that we had the day after the game on Selection Sunday. How would this team respond? Would they learn the lessons? Would they be able to channel that passion into a performance? And I think across the board, you'd have to say it's a resounding yes.
Thank you for quoting me, because I did say that, right? And I've said that.
I pay attention to you, Zach.
Thank you. And I've said that time and time again, and it's even more so true when you get to a 12-team playoff, is you want to be the best team at the end of the year. And that means, it doesn't mean on paper, it means who is peaking, who is playing their best football. And obviously, with that game on November 30th, I don't think there's anyone in the country that thought that team would be Ohio State. But after that game Saturday night, if there is anything that came out of that, outside of just Buckeye Nation itself, of getting that taste out of your mouth from Michigan. It's the confidence in that locker room and the message that was sent to the rest of the country, of the teams that are still in the playoff, of, oh boy, the Buckeyes are for real, right? If you are Oregon and you're sitting at home watching that game Saturday night, of all the second round matchups, Oregon's probably the most pissed off of who they have to play in the second round, right?
Oh yeah.
And it's like that team, this Ohio State team, I should say, that played Saturday night, if they play like that against Oregon, they play like that as the playoff moves on, there's no one beating them. I mean, that team that you saw Saturday night, that team is special. If they keep on showing out and building confidence off of what they did Saturday night, they're going to beat Oregon in the Rose Bowl. Then they're going to play Texas. Then they're going to probably play Georgia or Notre Dame. And my God, those teams are all shaking in their boots after seeing what Ohio State's able to actually do.
Yeah, and we had already seen Ohio State and Will Howard put together a very good offensive game plan going on the road, nearly beating Oregon, coming up a second short. We'll talk about that plenty, I'm sure, in the week ahead, and as the podcast heads out to California, Pasadena. Like, they've already scored, and the big difference and the lesson that Ohio State had to learn, which the game plan we saw was very different. The offense let them down against Michigan. They unleashed it. They let it rip against Tennessee. The first time around against Oregon, it was, where's that defensive pressure? What is happening to the secondary in this game? Why is there so much confusion with the play calling? They look completely disjointed, and Oregon took advantage. Well, Ohio State and Jim Knowles spent the next 2 weeks after that. They had the second off week. They streamlined the process. They added some blitz concepts. There were some twist games. We've talked about that throughout the second half of the season. And Tennessee didn't have any answer for that, and that's still building. And so if you add that into what you're talking about on New Year's Day, Zach, I mean, that makes Ohio State a threat to win 3 more. Now, they're going to have to go do it, of course, but that's the big change, is now that the defense and the Silver Bullets are operating at a level that did not exist 7 games ago.
You hit the nail on the head. If the defense played anything close to what they're capable of doing, they win that game in Eugene, right? And that's probably the only time this year where the defense has let them down. So now you're going out to Pasadena and playing an Oregon team that you've already faced once. The offense clicked against them. Basically, the same game plan that you saw Saturday night is what they rolled out against Eugene, and you're able to put points on that Duck defense. So now you're looking at the OSU defense, and if I'm a betting man, I'm going to bet that, guess what, that Buckeye defense is going to put up a hell of a lot better performance than they did in Eugene on October 12th or whatever the day was, right? So confidence again, right, comes back to this Ohio State team knows they can throw it on Oregon. This Ohio State team knows, like, hey, we are capable of putting up points and going toe-to-toe with the Oregon Ducks at everyone. I don't know if there's anyone not picking them to win the national championship, right? And all these brackets that we've seen. So now you're telling me I've got to rely on this defense with Caleb Downs, the way he plays, Cody Simon, the way he plays, Jack and JT, the way they played. And you're telling me that I'm not going to get a better performance out of Denzel Burke in the Rose Bowl than I did in Eugene, Oregon? Like, you got to be kidding me. I think this team's going to be so motivated to get another crack at Oregon. And it goes back to Saturday night. You build all that confidence. You have a top-tier SEC team coming to your house, and you absolutely blow them out. It's all about the confidence. And this team that they're going to face in Oregon is very similar to that team they played in Tennessee. And we talked about it on our shows leading up to it, is that, guess what? The similarities between Tennessee and Oregon are way more similar than what people think.
When, Zach, did you know that this game was over on Saturday night? Because I felt like once you saw counters on the run game, perimeter throws, shots to Jeremiah Smith in the first quarter, I was like, well, sorry, folks, that's all she wrote, because the defense is playing at a high level, and Ohio State scrapped whatever that game plan was against Michigan and put in the real deal. I was like, it's over. No matter, even if Tennessee finds a little bit of traction, if these are the kinds of things, offensive wrinkles that you're going to see from Chip Kelly and Ryan Day, and Justin Fry, include him in that as well. Luke Montgomery buried a dude on Quinshon's touchdown early on. Tegra Shabola, when he came back in, was better in the second half. He and Josh Fryer absolutely murdered a defensive tackle on the touchdown run there in the third quarter. Like, you can find plays for every single one of those guys on the offensive line. So again, there's plenty of credit to go around. But to me, it was like, once I saw that game plan and the passion and energy that Ohio State was playing with, I was like, well, this one's over, folks. I don't have to cancel my flight to LA.
Yeah. I knew this was different and the game was over after the first touchdown. When Jeremiah Smith caught that ball on the first drive for the Buckeyes and they scored, I'm like, this is it, right? Because that pass Will Howard threw was a thing of freaking beauty. You could tell early on the game plan. And then, I think Ohio State going into it, we talked about it Thursday night at Fairway Columbus and leading up to it. I think Ohio State was so nervous that Tennessee was going to take the game plan that Michigan has been so successful with, of being able to run the football, of being able to control the clock and the possession, which Tennessee is great at running the football. Everyone talked about it leading into this game. But as soon as you saw Ohio State start taking chances down the field, you saw Ohio State put up points early, there was no way Tennessee was going to be able to go toe-to-toe with the Buckeyes. And it goes back to, if you're telling me I've got to place a bet on the Ohio State defense of holding up against this Tennessee team with an Ohio State offense that's putting up points, I would take the Buckeye defense all day long.
Yeah. And I think I'll give Nico Iamaleava some credit for, scrambling around and putting his body on the line. That dude played his butt off. There's no question about that. But I felt like there was also a sense in the first quarter that Tennessee realized what I thought was going to be the case, and what you and I have talked about, that they were not going to be able to just line up and run the football at Ohio State. Jack, JT, Tyleek, Ty, Cody Simon, and Sonny Styles filling those lanes, filling those holes, and like, they were not missing tackles. Even if they had schemed it up, it might be going for 4 max. And I think once that realization set in, that they were not going to be able to run their normal offense, like, I could see them reeling on the sideline and like basically folding, because like, all right, well, Nico's gonna have to win it through the air, and that's not really possible with the way this pass rush is now getting home.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we said was the key to this Buckeye victory. Forced Nico to have to throw the football. And to your point, I give a lot more respect to Nico coming in here. I think he ended up running the ball 20 times on the day, right? And took some massive hits. Broke his helmet in the first quarter, right? Cody Simon just lit him up. So much respect to him. But to your point, Tennessee cannot win the game by throwing the football down the field. And I think Tennessee realized early on, like, hey, listen, we're going to have to put up some points, and we can't do that just running the football. And I hate to say it, I think it's the same thing with Oregon, right? And I know I want to talk so much about the Tennessee game, but it's almost like in this, like, I'm so excited for the Oregon game already because of the matchup, because of, hey, I know what Oregon's going to try and do. Dan Lanning is a confident coach, right? And so if this Buckeye team comes out and shuts down Oregon's running game again, and you have to rely on Dylan Gabriel to throw the football around, I don't know if that's a recipe for Oregon to win again, especially, he did it in Eugene, but I don't think that's going to happen. And you saw, here's another thing, and you can give your opinion on this, but the way Ohio State was flying around to the football Saturday night against a spread team with athletes from the SEC with a school like Tennessee, I don't know if I've seen that in a long time, right? Like, you bring up the Oregon game and the last true matchup against a very skilled offense, and they were just discombobulated in Eugene. But like Saturday night, it just seemed like they were clicking on all cylinders. The communication was there. Like, you bring up Georgia in 22. Like, they were scrambling as well against those athletes, right? And how many big plays did they give up? It was like going against an offense that has the athletes and the firepower to just hit massive plays against you. It's the first time in a long time I've seen this Ohio State defense swarming around to the football, being on the same page, putting so much pressure on the opposing quarterback. Like, it was so refreshing to see all these things that we've been talking about for so long.
Well, to me, it looked like, if it took 3 full years, so be it. I'm not sure that that's entirely the case, because last year Ohio State's defense was really good statistically, number 1 or number 2 in the country. Like, they just had some things against Michigan that came back to bite them. And even this year, when they're number 1, like, they could have made more plays in the fourth quarter than they did. We know that. I still do not pin that loss in any way, shape, or form on the Ohio State defense or Jim Knowles. And I think any rational, logical take on that game would agree with that. But they were not this version against Oregon at the middle of the season. And we discussed, the way that they were putting in the signals, whether the coverage and the pass rush were matching up, whether there was friction between Larry Johnson and Jim Knowles, or all those other things. And so we hadn't seen in a big game, in a situation like this, against, as you said, Zach, a team that wanted to go tempo and could go tempo, a team that wanted to run the football and could run the football, with the athletes that they had on the perimeter. We had not seen Ohio State just completely eliminate that and shut it down from start to finish. So we made that point earlier on with Jack and JT, and it was a slow build, and maybe it took longer than anybody envisioned or would have wanted. And maybe in some ways that the same is true for Jim Knowles to get into a situation like shutting down Penn State a month ago was a lot of catharsis for Ohio State. And Jim Knowles was, supposed to be outwitted by Andy Kotelnicki in that game. And they celebrated that win, and they knew how significant it was for them. It looks even better in hindsight than it did in real time, which was a top 5 win on the road against a playoff team. But what Penn State has done since then has been really impressive offensively. So I think that this has all been building for a while, but I think it reached a crescendo, like you're saying, Zach, on Saturday night. And that goes on both sides of the football, but especially on defense. Once you can complement Ryan Day's development with the quarterbacks and that collection of skill players at wide receiver, and Travion and Quinshawn running behind a more creative offensive line and rushing attack, that's curtains, man. They are being aggressive on both sides of the football, I guess would be the way that I sum it up, which is what we've all been asking for. You don't have to win a certain way or be vanilla and just prove that you're tougher than someone else. You can also be creative and unleash the best roster in the country and flatten somebody, which is what they did to the Vols, from the moment the game started.
You look at the media, and especially, you look at the Friday night playoff game, you look at the games leading up to the Ohio State-Tennessee game. Everyone across the country was talking about how that Saturday night game of Tennessee and Ohio State was actually going to be a true playoff game, right? Everyone was hyping it up that the SEC needed all of these playoff spots, and Tennessee was one of those deserving teams. And you saw what Ohio State just how they dismantled them, right? And now you look at the talk Saturday night, you look at the talk Sunday morning with the media across the country. No one's talking about that now, right? But everyone wants to throw shade at, SMU and Indiana and the way they didn't show up and they didn't deserve to be there. Is anyone going to bring up truly how good that performance was from Ohio State? Because no one right now wants to say that, Tennessee was a bad football team, they were not deserving to be in the playoff, right? Everyone thought that was going to be the game. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
No, I don't know if people are in shock with the way that game went, because no one's truly talking about how big of a victory, how big of a domination that was against a quote unquote true SEC power, right? Everyone, all they wanted to talk about was how skilled this Tennessee team was and how the fans are just crazier in the SEC and how they travel and do all these things. And then you look at that performance and you're like,
you mean to tell me that Lane Kiffin didn't have a tweet fired up for that one?
That's weird. Right. You and I could not be more aligned. You and I could not be more aligned on this Monday morning. Lane Kiffin tweeted with every college football playoff game over the weekend. And he tweeted, "Let's go Vols" before the game, and then didn't say anything else during the game. Right. And yeah, I mean, it's crazy to me that I don't think, and maybe I'm biased about this, but it's crazy that I don't think people are giving Ohio State enough credit for the way that they beat Tennessee Saturday night. Is that bad to say?
I think it's right. I think it's fair. And I think it's also a reminder of some of what we've been saying throughout this show. It's I think it's an admission. Well, okay, this is what Ohio State was supposed to do, and almost holding it against it. And I I don't think it's wrong to do that. I mean, I started the press conference on Saturday night asking Ryan Day where that performance had been. Like, we had not seen Ohio State fulfill its full potential. And so I think maybe it was just a realization. There they are. Okay. Well, now they're a national title contender again. Now they've figured it out. And maybe they don't want to, that's their way, a backhanded compliment way of giving them credit for it is like criticizing them for not doing it before now. But they're in the playoff. Like, this is supposed to be when it matters the most.
Well, I was just about to say, sometimes you're going to get the best version when, guess what? It's do or die. And this Ohio State team knows it's do or die, right? You lose and you go home. You're packing up. And I think this Ohio State team, after losing against Oregon, losing against Michigan, now you're in the 12-team playoff. It's like you've never had a third life, so to speak, in years past. And now you finally have a last life. And it's like you have to come out swinging. Otherwise, like, all your goals, all the talk of before the year, how this is the most skilled roster in all of college football and the most skilled roster in a very long time in college football. And now it's almost like you saw Saturday night that it's do or die. And they realize that. And the coaches came out and called the game like that. The players responded and played the game like that. Like, you could just feel that all of those guys knew what was at stake. And we've all been talking about how good this Ohio State team could be if they just came out and they were aggressive and were firing on all cylinders. And we saw that. But now you got to build on it, right? Now it's another do or die on January 1st in Pasadena. Yep. And arguably you're going up against the next best team in college football, right? There's talks that could be the national title game, quote unquote. But I mean, it was refreshing to see this team play like that. But at the same time, maybe it just took that, hey, we know our backs are against the wall. We're in this corner. We have to go out and do something about it.
Yeah. I mean, whatever it was, you simply have to give them credit for, and that goes for the players, that goes for the coaching staff. I think that goes for the true believers who showed up in Scarlet on Saturday night. I mean, I called it when I left the Horseshoe like a comprehensive victory for the entire program and a validation of what they have there. And I know that, some people argue and say that should happen all the time. And I get it. I don't know that today's the day I want to have that conversation. Because I think Ohio State should celebrate what they did on Saturday. It was a historic occasion, and it was an epic blowout of an SEC team that keeps them alive in the national title chase. And now I know how this is going to go for 3 and out. But Zach, are you going to do the same thing I just did and give it to everyone on the program, or are you going to narrow it down?
I mean, I seriously want to. My 3 and out is I'm doing 2 things. One is I'm giving all the praise to this Ohio State program, from the coaching staff to the support staff to the players to the backups, because you could tell how ready this team was Saturday night. Like, the last 3 weeks, you can tell the amount of time and energy that this team has put in with their bowl prep, their call it bowl prep, but their game prep, the mental just focus on this game. That's not just the starters, right? For them to be that prepared and for them to come out firing the way they did, that's an entire program thing. So I'm giving that to the entire program, and I'm going to have an out. This is the first time I've ever done this, because my out is all those Buckeye fans that said they didn't want to show up to this game. All those Buckeye fans that, guess what, are bandwagon fans and jumped off the bandwagon after that Michigan game and didn't have any trust in Ryan Day and this football team and sold their tickets to Tennessee fans. You're out. You're out. You can't jump back on the bandwagon, right? Like, don't show up to Pasadena. Don't go on social media saying how much you love this team and rooting and hollering and all that stuff. You're out. You're out. So the program's in my 3, but out are all those fair weather fans that there's a lot of them, right? You see the door. You're out. We'll see you in 2025. Not at the bowl game 2025. We'll see you in 2025 season.
Yeah. January 1 doesn't count.
January 1 does not count. No. We'll see you in August.
If Zach Boren says it, I'm going on his side every time. That's the safe spot for me to be. So I'll sign off on that. It is a Boren Blitz. It is a Monday, and Ohio State is alive and well in the college football playoff race after just completely destroying Tennessee and sending them back home to Rocky Top. Again, thanks for all the visitors who came in. It was great to see y'all. Travel safe.
The bars say thank you.
Yeah, they loved that opportunity right before the holiday season. A little bonus there for the Buckeyes, who are now Pasadena bound for the Rose Bowl against Oregon. We'll have all kinds of coverage this week as we get ready to head out there to Pasadena in Southern California for this massive matchup with Oregon. Can't wait for it. New page, next chapter coming for round 2. For Zach Boren, I am Austin Ward. Thanks for kicking off this Monday with us on the Podcast Daily. We'll see you later.